Skip, what's up, buddy?
Hey, buddy, how are you?
Good, man. What's going on? I like the glasses. Good, man.
What's that?
I like the
You get older,
always,
and
always deaf.
those ligaments don't flex as well, and so next thing you know, you need readers, and don't want to admit it. But how are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Just trying to get our kids back so we can get going here.
Wow, you and a lot of folks, right?
Rest of the world for sure.
Yeah, and the starting and stopping, and we're back, and now we've got a positive test, and everyone's got to shut down and all of that. So
we've not even been back. We've been shut down the whole time.
right. Yeah, I used to live out in California, so I kind of end up inadvertently paying more attention than I might otherwise, and it's not good anywhere, but it's particularly bad out there. So,
yeah.
So this is the new weight room. Is that what we see?
Yeah. This is it.
All right. Nice.
Good stuff.
So it's funny. I plan these things to be very loose and open conversational.
Sure.
But we go back far enough, and I think some of the storylines are interesting enough that I may have more notes getting ready to chat with you than I've had with someone in a while. So I think that's a good thing.
I think so.
But because for folks who don't know, when EliteForm started in 8 years ago, 2012, you were one of the way I would phrase it would be, you were one of the first people to give us legitimate interest in what we were doing.
Absolutely.
Which we always appreciated, respected. And then like one of the stories I will often tell people, and I've told it to my son in terms of how someone should sort of handle professional dealings. You and I had gone back and forth about going in together at Tennessee, and that ended up not working out really for sort of facility concrete issues.
Right.
And I'm standing in Texas A&M doing an install, and I get a call from you, and it was a very personal, here's what's happened. Right? It was a very upfront, it's not going to work out. Respected that then, respect it now, and I've really used that as kind of a guidepost in sort of mentoring people on how things should be handled.
Appreciate that.
And I don't think I ever told you that, so props for that.
First time I've heard that, yeah.
All right, gotcha.
Appreciate that, man. Trying to
no worries.
do things the right way, right?
Yeah, exactly. But in thinking about that, it kind of took me back, and I was just thinking about kind of how your career and EliteForm story, kind of the parallel paths of that. And one of the things you had going on at the time was Iron Game Chalk Talk, correct me if I'm wrong, was a thing back then, wasn't it?
Yep. Yeah,
you'd already ramped that up, which I think, and I was just saying this to my wife, puts you ahead of the game in kind of a unique spot compared to a lot of coaches. And I've never asked you and always wondered, what influences do you feel like made you decide to do that? Because it's atypical now, let alone 8 years ago.
Yeah, I think I appreciate all that, man. And you're a stud. And I love everybody in the company and really respect what you guys do as well. I think how that started was out of necessity. As you know, we all got let go at Tennessee. We didn't win enough ball games, and the head coach gets fired, and everybody gets fired right behind them. And so, I was on contract for another, I guess, year and a half at that point. And I was bored. My wife kicked me out of the house. She's like, "Get the hell out of here and go."
I've had that happen.
To do. And so I started traveling around and going and meeting with coaches in places that I couldn't get into while I was at Tennessee or whatever. And it got expensive. It just got expensive to go travel and drive and time and all those things. And so I was like, oh, maybe I start Skyping these people. And so I started Skyping them, and one of my assistants came over, and we were talking to a coach that we both knew, and he's like, "Man, this is awesome, like a chalk talk session." And I was like, "Yeah, it's And so I literally just started hitting record because I was, I went through a coaching change at South Florida, and really that kind of spawned my whole entrepreneurial journey but kind of put it on hold at Tennessee just because of the magnitude of the school and all that. And then once I got done, I was looking for my content. Like I didn't like to write, even though I've written a couple books now and things like that. But I didn't like to write. I didn't want to blog. I didn't want to do that stuff. And I thought the video interview stuff was kind of just natural. And so I started putting it up on YouTube, and it was actually Mike Boyle that reached out and said, "Hey, this stuff's great. You should make this a podcast." And I'm like, "Yes, sir. What's a podcast?" And so he connected me with with Anthony Renna, and they were one of the first strength and conditioning podcast out there, and I was, they kind of gave me all the ins and outs and started it and went from there. So it was fun. I mean, it's really been a great project. I think I shot the last episode just about a month ago, and I've got a new podcast coming out and a new book coming out here pretty soon that's kind of going down this particular topic. But it was a big part. I mean, I did it for 7 years.
It's had more longevity than most television shows on major networks. So
and
you must have done something right.
Over 300 episodes, and what's people fail to realize is, although it gave a ton back to the community, and there's a lot of people I very rarely walk in to meet somebody that hasn't listened to at least one episode that's in this field. So that's really cool and humbling. But as much as it gave back to everybody, it also I had a one-on-one conversation with the best leaders in our field, and how you can't walk away from some of that type of stuff a better coach is beyond me. So it made me a better coach. It made me more connected. It reduced the number of separations between me and answers when I needed answers. And really, really blessed that just kind of all came to be. So yeah, you were right at the beginning, one of the early sponsors. And
I kind of forgot about that. I wasn't even thinking about that angle. But
yeah.
You've just reposted a lot of those, haven't you? Or did you made them more available in some way?
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of catalog those because, I've partnered with another coach, and we're launching our Game Chalk Talk 2.0, and he's going to take it over, and it was something that I had put so much of my 7 years of my professional career into. I didn't want to see die, but I wanted to make sure it lived on the right way. And so I wanted to catalog all those episodes because there's a ton. I mean, there's just a ton of great content there. And so I put it on I did a kind of a countdown type thing on Instagram here, and it's highlights in my feed or whatever. So really, my daughter did it. So
well,
there's a mistake. She's going to school to be a social media person, so I figured I might as well put it to work.
It takes a team, right? So
100%.
That makes sense.
100%.
So, so I always find I'm gonna kind of bridge from that. So, Tennessee happens, right? And then your book was this interesting transition because you write the book, CEO Strength Coach. For those who don't have it, and I don't know who that would be watching this wouldn't have it, but go get it. But then you actually move out of coaching, right? Join Plae and actually become business side, right? And so, I would describe a lot of what you did, and tell me if you think this is fair, as kind of ambassadorship, right?
Sure.
And you did an amazing job. But what surprised you about actually moving over into that business side? Because there's always what you expect,
right?
And you were with a good crew, but there was always going to be some subset of things that surprised you. And I'm just curious, what were those?
Yeah, great question. Obviously, I think for people that are watching that maybe don't know the story, we adopted all 4 of our kids, and I missed the first, 13, 5, and 3 years of their life. And they were all going into high school or already in high school. And I was living apart coaching in Eastern Michigan, while my family wanted to keep them kind of set in one area and stay at Tennessee. And so I got to a point where I was like, I'm not gonna miss the last 4 years that they're in the house. I'm just not gonna do it, and so fortunately, Plae is a phenomenal company and people that I've come to love and really respect. And they kind of, Rich Gray and Brett Wade's kind of approached me about this kind of ambassador type of role. And I've always coached. I mean, I think through the podcast and other things, I've kind of become a guy that's been known to be kind of a coach's coach, right? And as much as coaching athletes, and so they pitched me on it, and it was a chance to be back home, and it was a chance to learn kind of business and all those things. And what people don't realize is I still coached quite a bit. I had teams all over the world that I would work with on top of doing some of the other stuff. But it got to a point where, I miss coaching. It's hard to not do something that's in your DNA. It's something that you do every single day. And so not being able to do that for 12 hours a day was quite honestly, to be honest with you, as much as this is a chaotic time, like, I thrive in chaos. Just coaching has been, my whole career has been chaotic, and it's where I feel most comfortable, to be honest with you. And with Plae, it was a little too comfortable, so very fortunate. I mean, I had a great time there and got to do a lot of really cool things. But to your point, to your question, I was surprised that I really came to appreciate how much, even though coaching is an extremely hard profession, it's tough. The amount of the time management skills and interpersonal skills and things like that it takes to be in kind of and thrive in the business world, it's a whole nother level, and so I had to really grow and develop a set of confidence that I didn't necessarily have. Like I negotiated a pretty substantial deal in China, basically through an interpreter, and sitting across from the family that brought the Olympics to Beijing. And I never in a million years would I have thought that I had the skill set or the business acumen or anything along those lines to be able to do that. And that's what the experience taught me. The experience taught me that I'm capable of a lot more than just counting to 10 every single day. And that, and it gave me the confidence that if coaching was ever taken away, that I could be successful and build something from scratch. And that gave me the confidence I needed to go back. Now that my kids are off to college, and the head coach and the offensive coordinator here were, friends of mine, roommates of mine. It was a good time in our life just to kind of, throw caution back to the wind and get back to doing what I absolutely love every single day. And then also be able to kind of do some of these other things that were, I found like the coach education part of it, like as much as I like the X's and O's of strength and conditioning, I love teaching that to athletes. I wasn't as motivated to do that with coaches as I might have thought initially. What I come to find is that I really like helping coaches create stability and security kind of through some of these, ways to create multiple streams of income and branding and those types of things.
Well, yeah, I always find it fascinating. Like when people present, and particularly if they present a lot, which you do, right? The way in which they get into those conversations often tells you as much about them as sort of the literal words that are coming out of their mouth, right?
Yeah.
And I've seen you present multiple times, and you tend to be pretty thematic, right? So there was CEO strength coach, and now there's like the IU strength series, you gave your permanent beta talk, right? And you're pretty upfront in saying those were concepts you were working through. But I also think it's interesting. So like none of those are a direct sets and reps kind of conversation, right? Sure. It's a culture piece, and it's almost who we are as an industry, right? Particularly for strength coaches. And that seems like it's always getting talked about on social media, like sort of how to improve where S&C exists in the larger landscape. And you address a lot of those things in a unique way because you are using social media tools,
Sure.
and coming at things thematically. So is there anything that led you to that? Like, have you been watching Gary Vee videos or other marketers or people like that have led you down that path?
Yeah, I mean, when I went through that coaching change at South Florida, I read probably every business book that was on the at the bookstore at that time, and that led
There's a
me.
hell of a lot of them, so that's a lot of reading.
I mean, I think I read. If I'm not mistaken, I want to say I read like 112 books that year.
Does one stand out, or one or two?
The one that got me kind of going on all this was Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week. But then, Gary Vee had Crush It at that time that I read. And, there's a handful. E-Myth Revisited was one that I kind of based CEO Strength Coach on.
Oh, okay.
So there were some really good ones. But going down that path, I think, ultimately for me, there's a book that I would highly recommend. It's more the premise of the book that I recommend, but it's called Blue Ocean, right? And so there's, the premise behind it is that, when you go out fishing and you throw chum in the water, right? All the sharks feed off the one set of chum and becomes red, and everybody's fighting over the same thing. Whereas there's this freaking stinking big blue ocean that's around that you're one of the baddest creatures in the freaking, sea. Go out and find your own food, and that's how I've always kind of approached this, wherever there was followers, I never wanted to be a follower. I never want to, I want to learn from the elite. I want to take in what's been successful. That's why I asked one of those questions, like, what's one of the biggest mistakes you've made and how you learned from it? And I always ask that in my podcast.
Right.
But to me, if everybody's going right, I want to go left, and just innately. And that's where it's kind of, I've always been able to kind of, that's why I started a podcast when that wasn't, I mean, there was no shortage of people out there that were making fun of me for starting a podcast when I started it. Or there was no shortage of people that were making fun of me when I wrote a book, and then all of a sudden it becomes a bestseller, and then it becomes an international bestseller, and honestly, both those things, I started with never, ever thinking that I thought my mom would buy my book and maybe my wife, I thought maybe 5 people would listen to the podcast.
Maybe your wife, because she's heard you talking about it all before.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've heard all this.
She doesn't want to hear any more than she already does. And so I never started those with the intent of having success with them. It was really, but it led just by putting myself out there and taking calculated risk. It's led to tons of opportunities, and I've just been able to capitalize on those opportunities when they've come around.
Well, timing is important, so no question about that. Can you hear me okay? I feel like we're cutting out a little bit. Okay.
Yeah, my phone's about to die, I think, so I need to go put it on the charger. Go ahead.
Fair enough. So, I wanted to back up to that negotiation that you were talking about in China. So how did you find yourself in that scenario? Was it just the case that because you were so front and center with Plae, there was no way, you were just always going to be a part of it, or how did that happen?
I got a Zoom call going on in here. I'm going to mute it really quick. So just hold on 1 second.
No worries.
The coach will recommend around 35 reps for a strength exercise.
Got to multitask here.
We all do.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
So how that came about, a long story short, was when I got Strength Coach of the Year, there happened to be a Chinese delegation right behind me at the award ceremony that were just there as they'd come over to go to the NSCA show and learn and meet people and whatnot. And they were just sitting there quietly, and in between, rather than sit there like a lot of strength coaches do, I got up, introduced myself, shared contact information, let them know that I was, that I'm glad that they were in the country, and I hope they enjoy the experience. And if I could help in any way, let me know. And one of those people was the interpreter for a much part of the Olympic committee, and that person was tied to the people that brought the Olympics over to China. And when I kind of went out on my own with Plae, they reached out because they wanted me to come over and coach them. And of course I couldn't do that and do what I was doing, but I could hire coaches. And so that's what we ended up doing, is we ended up employing 29 coaches to go over to China. And out of that group of 29, I think 9 of them now have become head strength coaches in colleges, already.
That's nice.
Like, I think, to me, that's the mistake that a lot of coaches make, right? They stay in their own world, they stay in their own bubble, they got their core group of friends, and that's kind of what I talked about in that permanent beta, where you have, your first degree separation of friends, this first circle of friends. But you gotta find a way to get those kind of third connections in, those unfamiliar connections, and have it constantly come and feed into your psyche, because there's a lot of people having success in a lot of different ways that aren't your way, or aren't your friend's way. And if you're not exposed to any of that, I think, just think about our country right now. Like, you're either extreme right or you're extreme left. There's really nothing in between anymore. And I'm not here to make a political statement, but I think there has to be, like, everything's being skewed in one direction or the other. They're not getting new ideas, or you're not putting yourself into new situations. And I've always tried to do that, whether or not that's introducing myself to people when there's a good part of me that wants to sit there and be quiet and not do anything, or do a podcast and force myself to think, like, who would be outside my comfort zone to interview?
Right.
Those are things that I've always tried to do. And I think what you said earlier about the X's and O's of strength and conditioning, that's easy. Like, it's not complicated. You pick up heavy weight, you move it faster, you run faster. Those are things that are, we try to make that too complicated. But what really is complicated is the group dynamics and the team cohesion and the culture piece, and getting the athletes to buy into you and believe in what you're doing, and all those types of things. And if you're not studying other disciplines to gain inspiration, I think then you're fighting a losing battle.
Yeah, and one thing that I just earlier in the week recorded a podcast with Pat Ivy. Like, we did a Beyond Sets and Rep session, and we hit on this theme of people first. And that's another kind of phrase that I think buckets a lot of what it's an oversimplification of what you often do. But your story about how you ended up in that negotiation hits the point. Like, you just went over and introduced yourself and made it about people, right?
Yeah.
That moment was, as you described it, super simple. And if you think about Iron Game, Chalk Talk, those are conversations with people, right? I mean, I realize you used a lot of, some similar questions, right? But it wasn't, when you prescribe incline bench, like, are you using 80% or 75% of a bench?
Right.
It was much deeper than that, right?
Right.
And sort of kind of pinning a couple of things together. For those who haven't heard you talk about permanent beta, and your sort of concepts or theme with that, can you give us a quick summary of kind of how you arrived on that as a theme and what you're working through? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, that's kind of a working process for you right now, isn't it? Just the way you think about that?
Not so much. I mean, I think it's definitely, it's not the projects that I'm working on, but it's it was part of a bigger presentation that I've been working on to give. And I think,
better way
like
to
you
put
said,
it,
when you speak as much as I do, you got to come up with a couple each year that you're gonna kind of cycle through. But I read a book called Startup of You, so that's another good business book that if you haven't read, that's Reid Hoffman is the co-founder of LinkedIn, and that concept came out of that book, where they would constantly be, in permanent beta. And they gave the example of Steve Jobs ends every, quarterly report with, "This is the first day of the internet," and that they're always striving to be a better version of themselves. And a quote that I've lived by in my coaching career has been, a relentless pursuit of continuous improvement. It's in every manual that I've ever done. It's on, usually on every wall in every weight room. And I think, like, you just never you can never just feel like you've arrived. And I think there was plenty of opportunities through my career where I got to the NFL. It's kind of, honestly, that was my goal when I got into coaching, was to coach in the NFL. And I was like, man, that'll take 20 years and I'll do it and I'll feel great about it. And, the whole deal. And it happened when I was 22 years old, so then I was like, okay, now what, and I've had to reset my goals, my dreams several times. I'm even, honestly, be full transparency and vulnerable, like with my kids going off to college and my wife hitting a new time in our lives and all that. Like, I'm having to recalculate right now, like, what's my life goals? Like, what really do I want to accomplish? And honestly, it doesn't have a whole lot to do with counting to 10 faster, or getting more guys in the NFL or whatever it is, right? I think this is a byproduct. This gives me a platform to do a lot of things that I want to do, which is help people become the best version of themselves. But ultimately, you have to reset that. And so permanent beta is just that, that industry term of being in beta is kind of, you release something that's not quite fully developed yet, and you continually test and refine and make better. And eventually you can kind of take that beta tag off, and release it to the world. But I want to be in permanent beta. I want to continue to be striving and improving and challenging myself and challenging the people around me.
Well, yeah, I think the phrase I've often heard used most is growth mindset.
Yep.
Right. And I always think it's funny. There are these terms that cross over various industries where it's just that particular industry's jargon, right, for a similar concept. And I always joke I'm just the translator around EliteForm anyway. So I'm often connecting those dots, right? And so, like, permanent beta, if I said that to the wrong group of people, they was talking about, well, there's tax implications if you stay in beta, blah, 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 blah. And then I have to go, hold on. That's not where we're at with any of that, but okay. So then, like, you decide to go to Fresno, right? And is it the case that, because we haven't really touched base since that happened, did you sort of start to get your feet on the ground and then the pandemic pulled the rug out from under you, or how's that start and stop us been?
Yeah, I mean, one thing before I get into that, just to kind of go back to what you were just saying, I think that success leaves clues, and I think whether or not that's permanent beta or some of these other industry terms, I mean, you look at enough people, you read about enough people, there's a common thread that's throughout all of them. And, it's not, like I said, it's not hard, to, How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? It was written however many years ago. Well, that's exactly
right.
It's that people thing. That's what it comes back to. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I literally got here the next day. I was coaching starting our off season, and had a great 8 weeks, and we have a good staff here. I came in, we kept everybody. We even Andy Ward's on this, I think, was on here. I think I saw him on here. He was a phenomenal coach. We kept him on as the director of strength and conditioning for football, but I came in as the assistant athletic director and obviously worked with football, and it was a unique environment. It was unique. You get basically, I got dropped in as the boss, but everybody else stayed the same. And then the team, had success 2 years ago, but didn't have success last year. And a blend of new coaches and the whole deal. And so we had a really good 8 weeks of training and getting to know each other. And then all of a sudden it's been, I think we're going on week 19 of being apart, a friend of mine and a former staff member, Lou Corella, who's at Georgia Tech, that's gone off and done great things as well. I mean, he's been strength coach of the year and all that. He's a former intern. He gave a presentation pretty early on through all this about just kind of really like challenging yourself to think outside the rack, and really be different. And that's what we've tried to do here. We really tried to come at it, and how do we reach these guys? What can we control? We can control our relationship with the athletes. We can control, our respect towards them. We can reshape their nutrition mindset. We can reshape a lot of things that maybe we don't have the time to do, where we're working in the business instead of on the business. So we've really refined our systems as a staff and really dug into, what is our core values and our mission statement and our objectives, and what's our system, our philosophy, and the whole deal. And it's really, it's as much as it's not been good for our football program or our sports, to miss that much training. It's also been good to kind of hit pause a little bit and shore up all these other things that I think that are going to give us, much more success in the future.
Yeah, that is the one, like, you're always trying to find, anytime a change is forced upon you, you're trying to find the most effective way to deal with that change, right? And
Right.
what's funny is, because you can cross over into those business conversations, like, I would almost echo the same thing on our side.
Right.
Like, it's a little difficult when you've really valued face-to-face conversation, right? Installing a demo unit, like working with the staff, being there directly to explain it, and now you can't go anywhere.
Right.
And so, yeah, we're kind of doing that, take an audit, right? Are we matching our values, right? Are all of those things happening top down, and in how we present ourselves out to coaches and staffs? And so the analogies in some ways don't stop, and that's, I think, one reason why your book was so successful, and the way you walk through various ways of talking about similar themes is always honestly pretty awesome. So, so who knows what's going to happen with the pandemic? But like you mentioned, being in permanent beta, do you have, like, what else are you excited about for you going forward? Because I know your wheels are always turning, just like you've alluded to. So, I mean, you have projects you can't talk about. So I'm not trying to dig anything up like that. But are there some other things that you're excited about?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited. One of the core reasons why I took this job was because I feel like I think what I've done kind of entrepreneurially, what I've tried to build this ecosystem around has really gotten my goal now, and kind of one of the working goals that I'm using is that I ultimately I want to coach for free. Like, this is what my passion is. This is literally what I would do for free. And I have done it for free, and so, like, I don't want my livelihood to be tied to wins and losses or, the challenges that come with athletics or any of those types of things. I want to have enough stuff going on to where I'm literally coaching, because I want to coach, and I want to teach other people how to do that as well, and that's kind of really where the focus of the new projects are coming. And, but I took this job because I feel like I can help my staff double their salary and stay here and make this place great, and I've had enough different logos on my chest that I've realized that it's not about the logo, and it's not about, every place has fleas, every place has problems. It's really about just building something great where you're at and making the big time where you're at. And so, I think for me, going out here and experience a new part of the country that I've not coached in, been a part of, was really exciting for us. Now, granted, we haven't been able to get out a lot because of all this, and my wife has an immune system deal, which makes it tough to get her out, and even in a controlled environment right now. But we're gonna love that part when we get out into it, and I'm excited to be part of the staff and really bouncing those types of ideas off one another and growing together. But and then I'm excited for game day. I'm excited to get back on the field. And what I found,
I guess it would have been a while since you had a game day. So that's gotta be
3 years or 4 seasons, I guess it is now. But But that was probably the biggest thing. Like I think you've seen me present on how I got into coaching in the first place, and it really started with me walking on a football field when I was 8 years old. And a coach kind of let me watch practice, and that's probably more so than even the coaching part. That's the part that I missed the most. Was here's a game that basically raised me that I hadn't had a part of for a little bit. So. Excited about that. Excited about, like I said, the new book and the podcast and all that. That should be coming hopefully here in the next month. I should be able to release some of that stuff. But really just finding ways to be creative and give back in a different way and pivot from where I see everybody else going. I think everybody else is kind of going and seeing some of the things that, they're seeing that they can start podcasts and they can see that they're starting things like that. And I'm like, freaking, that's awesome. Do it. Love it, but I don't want to be a follower, even if I was one of the first,
Right.
I don't want to be a follower.
Sure.
And I like trying new things. So I like this time right now is actually my favorite time whether or not, I don't know if I'm going to fall on my face or not, I think this book's going to go, I think this podcast is going to go, but I don't know, and I really like that part.
Well, there is something about kind of jumping in and taking that risk. I mean, as you can appreciate probably more than many, like it's not like EliteForm jumping in with that was without risk, right? And so there are some people that gravitate toward that, and others that are like, well, yeah, I don't think so. Risk averse. But then, like one of the things I find interesting is even inside some of those trends, like that idea of going another direction. Like, so we started a podcast, which at that point was nothing original. But we have like no format. Like, so when COVID-19 hit, my whole goal was to miss having conversations with guys like you, but I want them to still be conversations.
Right.
Like, so if you and I ended up, like you put that picture of a pump track up on your Instagram, and I was like, hey, my man, I got you. Like, I'm the guy you can ride a pump track with, so let's go. And if we talked about that for 20 minutes, I'd have been in, right?
Right.
And what happened, I'd be curious to know if you feel the same way. When everyone realized we were going to be locked down, almost basically as a country, right? Varied by state, but as a country, everyone jumped to creating webinars, right? And being formal in terms of how we were all talking.
Right.
And we had already had a few podcasts, and I already had sort of this kind of Joe Rogan-esque open format approach. But, if you and I want to talk about pump tracks or what's going on with your kids or what have you, yeah, I like themes too, right? I still want to talk about permanent betas. Oh yeah, if there's something, top of mind where you got to paint your house and you're like, ugh, can I jump on the chaise lounge and just bitch about this for a few minutes? I'm in. And so, yeah, so we like and that's almost selfish on my part, right? So we grew, got to the point where I wasn't able to be the guy talking to Ron McKeefery anymore. Like at times I had to be the guy that was staring at spreadsheets.
Right.
And it's one of those things where there's this balance, right? I always say to our staff, smart people get bored. And you want to have those people, but at the same time, that's a risk.
Right.
And so, like, even if you and I haven't talked for a while, when I see you hit a refresh, basically in my mind, I'm like, okay, I kind of want to know what's going on because there's a smart guy that's hit a pivot, right?
Right.
Like he's hit a refresh, it's a growth mindset, it's permanent. And so half the time I'm tempted to just text you and be like, so what are you up to? Like, what's next? Because the gears are publicly turning. Yeah, sure. I mean, it varies, right? I mean, some people, like I said, like to kind of keep it safe, but
that's part of it too, right? You got to play the game too, and you got to build a little anticipation. You got to build some things, right? And it's kind of where I'm at with that kind of stuff right now as well. But you're right. I mean, what you do and what I do is I try to identify those thought leaders that even with the podcast, I really tried to get innovators and originators. That was kind of my core values of what I wanted to do with the podcast. So instead of going to somebody that was doing the tier system, I wanted to go to Joe Ken. Instead of somebody that was doing, triphasic, I wanted to go to Cal Dietz. I wanted to go to one of the, or who did he learn from to kind of come up with that methodology.
Right.
And I think when you do that, I think you take out a lot of the fluff, right? And that's, to me, I try to eliminate as much of that as I can because I want to, our time is valuable. It's not we're some of the most time inefficient people on the planet, coaches are, but it is valuable and should be spent. What little time you can garner back should be spent with your families, instead of whatever. But you're right. I mean, I think when you identify some of those people and you see what they're up to, pay attention because, there's usually a reason why that's happening, and that's how trends get started, I guess, ultimately, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's trends that get started for very good reasons, right? And they catch on because they just make sense. Like there's cliches that exist because they're true.
Right.
Right. And like sometimes you hit some weird one, but the 80-20 rule is the way I think about it. Right. So, and it's interesting, like when you talk to, like people will use the term thought leaders, right? And like when you think of Cal, triphasic, he's a thought leader. He's like, if you hear him speak, you're lucky because he's got this very kind of casual, cool way he presents some very complex information. But it's like it's all there to be backed up with science, right? Which obviously I'm a geek, but I love that.
Sure.
And so it just trickles down. So if you're talking directly to him, and people like you then are able to have a quality conversation instead of just hitting the high notes. It just elevates everybody. It elevates your platform, right? If you want to look at it that way, right?
Right.
And it also shares with people, here's how you have that conversation. We ended up being a little bit different because no one knew who the hell we were, right? So we had no platform. So the best thing that happened to us was like third-party validation, right? So, yourself, like even though formally we've never done business, but we still have a great relationship. So we ended up gaining a platform because we work with great people. And now I think we've been around long enough that people know we're not completely morons, right? But then it just builds off of itself. And so like when we met, you already kind of had a platform. Like you'd already gained, like it was Tennessee, pretty good place to be.
Sure.
Right. And so what's that?
It didn't start there.
I didn't catch it.
Was, a lot of years ago. So
exactly.
I didn't start
exactly.
there. I think that's what people forget.
You just took the words out of my mouth. Yeah, exactly. So, but you've never been complacent about it either. And I'm not trying to write a Hallmark card, but that permanent beta, always working and going forward and realizing there's another step. Like I had a hand raised, like occasionally I coast. And then you look at yourself in the mirror and like, what are you doing? Right. And you get back
all
on.
Yeah, we all do. But I think I think that's the difference, right? The ones that can hold themselves accountable to not live in there and stay in there. And I think that's where we're at right now, even like as a country or as a society right now. Like there's a good amount of people that are like, oh, I thought this was just going to be like a 6-week freaking vacation and we're going to move on. And, I think, the ones that started day one with like, okay, where's the opportunity? And not necessarily opportunity in making money or anything like that, but where's the opportunity to reach my players in a different way? Where's the opportunity to improve my business? Where's the opportunity to do different things? I think that's what it's about. And what you're saying about Cal, like, it goes back to what we're saying. Like, Cal thought outside the box. He thought outside the norm. That wasn't the norm. He challenged somebody's ideals with that. And it was all information that he pulled from other people. He just put it together in a unique way. And and presented it in a unique way, and was willing to kind of put himself out there against the norm. And I think that's where everybody that's jumping on, like we're talking about creating podcasts or jumping on different kind of trends right now and different things. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, building a better mousetrap is worked for a lot of people for a lot of years. The difference is finding your unique selling proposition. What's different? That's what, like, when you guys came around, like, I jumped on it immediately because it was outside of the norm. It was unique. It was a differentiator. It was a way to, and even though it didn't quite work out, I mean, like, I respect anybody that's an originator and an innovator, and goes outside of the norm. And that's why, I mean, it's obviously the reason why that company came about was because of guys like yourself that live, breathe, and eat that, and that's why we've become friends and stayed friends all these years. But I think, to me, my career, what I've done boils down to two things. It's taking risk and taking action. I mean, to me, I think there's so many people that are so scared of failure that they're paralyzed themselves from taking any kind of risk. And to me, it's like it's just part of the process. Like, if this book fails, great. I just learned a way not to do it, and all right, I'll get back to coaching X's and O's strength and conditioning and stay in my wheelhouse or whatever. But I think that's, to me, there's too many people that, I guess, you don't want to sound like the old men, right? But like the old men are saying,
it's hard not to. But yeah,
all you did was press reset on the video game all the time when you were getting beat, right? And it's reinforced this kind of mindset. But for me, like, that was the only way I could freaking grow at all. Like, we just didn't have the resources when I was a kid, and I didn't come from, a lot of support and things like that. And so every step of the way, I had to fight for it. Every step of the way involved me falling many more times than me taking the next step. And I think, to me, I go back to our career, our profession. Like, this profession was born in a time, when people thought it was bad to lift weights. They thought it was bad. They thought it was, bad for you athletically. And yet there's people that were originators and innovators that said, you know what? No, not only do I believe in this, but someday there's going to be people making $500,000 doing it. And that's exactly where we're at. But then there's the same type of, that profession that was born out of that mindset is also the same profession now that's like, all right, I've got my degree, I've got my certification, throw my hands up, where's my job? Well, how about we get out and think outside the box and we create? The only thing that we've really done uniquely, in my opinion, from a strength and conditioning profession is we started going down the tactical route, and that started opening up some more jobs, right? But, like,
yeah,
there's so many other ways. I was telling the story when I had Boyd Epley on the last podcast. I talked to a group out of Texas that was, they're talking about putting, that I was talking with the company, but they were asking me about putting strength coaches on oil rigs, because of the physical demands and the injury prevention that goes along with what we do.
Interesting.
I mean, that could probably create another 200 jobs, in strength and conditioning. So stop sitting on your hands, even if you're just like, okay, this business stuff or this other stuff doesn't sound, I always thought outside the box. I created, 20 years ago now, I created a digital record board, because I just simply realized, like, there's got to be a better way than just putting up, names on a chalkboard or something up top. There has to be a better way. And force myself to think outside the box. I think that's, if you do that enough, you keep asking why, you're willing to take risks, you put yourself out there in unique ways, the world has a way of kind of coming back and rewarding you for that.
Well, and one of the things you just illustrated that I think people lose sight of it in the business world, but it applies in a lot of facets of life, is like some of the examples you just gave are just really one step beyond what's currently being done. Like, it's this concept, I talk a lot about concentric circles.
Yeah.
So, like, talking about having strength conditioning coaches on oil rigs is unique in one sense, but it's still strength conditioning.
And it's
right?
not that much of a
A digital record board is still a record board, right? Kind of you made the mousetrap comment, right? It's
Right.
this slow expansion. No one's asking, well, once in a while you do get somebody who's just, it's completely unique. It's like a Nikolai Tesla kind of thing where now they've come up with something that's completely different. But most of
Sure.
the time what we're talking about is an incremental improvement. And so now I'm going to try to bring it all together because we're almost running out of time, right? But that growth mindset, that permanent beta, if you're just constantly looking for those gains, I mean, you can make strength and conditioning analogies, right? Percentage gains, right, are what win. And if you stick with it, like you can end up having some of those even if you don't expect it. So again, not to write you a Hallmark card, but I love how you start presenting these different themes, but when someone pays attention, there's this commonality to what you're talking about.
100%.
And I just love how you tie it all together.
I think it's important too that people realize that that's not just professionally, right? Like professionally, I'm motivated to have success, no doubt about it. I want to. That's something that drove me for a long time. But I am, as much as I'm motivated to have success in the weight room, I'm like 100 times more motivated to be a success as a father or as a husband, you know. And those same qualities I try to put into my own family as well. Like I'm always thinking, okay, parents are taking their kids to go mountain bike. Okay, what can I do? I'm going to take them to,
You can call Skip. You can call Skip and tell him, hey,
Skip, and we're going to go.
This park at 4:30. Let's rip.
I think it's, I think you challenge yourself to think, to take it a step further. To me, that's always been the case. Is like, how can I, even with our players, like, how can I push them just a little bit further than everybody else? And I love that concentric circles. I'm going to steal that from you.
Go for it.
That's a good one.
Go for it. Well, I was laughing. So when Pat and I recorded the podcast earlier in the week, like at the beginning, I was like, I don't know what to do with this because I'm used to being on the other side. Like I worked hard. I didn't really want to be a host. I just thought I was like, I was the person that needed to do it. And I hate listening to myself, but I was like, okay, well, that's what I need to do. So I got in that rhythm, but now Pat's asking the questions. And I actually had to make a Post-it note, like, don't turn this around. Like, because I didn't want to just default into not being the guest, right?
I'm guilty of that.
But yeah, well, you've done a great job today. You haven't turned it around and asked me a bunch of questions. So
I had to stop myself on the concentric circles. I was going to go down a rabbit hole with that one.
If you had talked to any of the staff, they'll tell you I go down the rabbit holes with the best of them. So to the point where guys just know now when to tune me out. Like it'll go silent. Everybody else will be silent. I just keep talking. And I'm like, well, unfortunately I can't now. They can just turn me off. But when we're all in the office, I'm waiting for Avery to comment on here. But like Johnny will just start working again. Like he kind of knows where I'm going. We've been around each other long enough. He can finish my sentences, and that's it. But well, hey, we're basically out of time, so we can just wrap up. Steel concentric circles. Send me a note about what racks you have, and we'll get you a demo unit. And I don't care, COVID kills a budget or whatever. We're not worried about that. We'll just bang on it for a while, pay it forward. But thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it. Hopefully we can catch up again soon in person, more than an hour. And I'll lead your crew through that pump track.
That'd be awesome.
I think that's the plan. Demo install, pump track the next day with the family. It'll be good to go.
Between jiu-jitsu and mountain biking, there's enough strength coaches that are into both of those two things that the next conference, that's what we need to do. Is everybody doing the bike?
We're actually thinking about hosting something like that. But on the jiu-jitsu thing, that's fascinating because Stuart Hart, who's UNL's women's basketball coach, he and I just met for coffee a couple of weeks ago because he was sick of webinars, just like me.
Right.
But he brought up jiu-jitsu. And we were talking, he was like, hey, man, you would love it because it's like chess, but with physicality.
Yeah.
And like he kind of hooked me, so I think I'm going to give that a try.
You'll love it. It's I mean, I was a wrestler, so it came a little more natural that way. Just the mindset of being on the mat. But
Gotcha.
but the chess match is absolutely right. Like, there's not a day that goes by that you don't learn something new, and so I absolutely love that. But for me, I know we're trying to close this off, but like mindfulness is something that I've always like. You look at those success clues, right, and you see all these leaders that they're constantly talking about mindfulness, but like, you put me in a room by myself with my thoughts, and it's an ugly place. Like, it's not a, like, I cannot relax. It just doesn't happen. But the only two
You and
places
me
that
both.
I've found myself to be completely present, which is really what mindfulness is, has
Right.
been when I'm out bike and when I'm doing jiu-jitsu. And mostly because if you don't focus on that, you're going to get hurt.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's been good. Yeah, what stinks is my mountain bike has got an issue with it right now. And I took it to the shop, and they've had it in there for 3 weeks, and I haven't gotten it back yet. So
if Johnny's listening to this, he's now former professionally offended, if you will, because he was a pro wrench for a long time. So now he's planning on flying out to Fresno as well,
Come on.
guaranteed, to take
Man,
care of that problem.
I'll send my bike to you tomorrow, because it's got no point.
Ship it. We got you covered.
I've borderline threatened this bike shop now, just on the low key.
Well, one of the things that's crazy about one of the things that's crazy about the pandemic is the bike industry has had its biggest year ever. Like, no one has anything because they've completely sold out. So unfortunately, you're probably caught in a little bit of that. But all right, brother, I could talk to you for another hour, but I should probably close out. So thanks again, and I'll email you about that other stuff. Appreciate it.
You too, brother. See you, man.
All right, thanks, guys.